I emailed and said, hey, I'd love a tour. I'd love to see how the discs are made. And they said, we don't do tours. And I said, well, hey, I was a consultant. I'd love to consult for free. And so long story short, you fast forward 6 months and I'm the CEO.
Welcome back to Founder Real Talk. I'm your host, Josh Broward, and if you're joining us for the first time, let me tell you what this is about. We talk to founders all the time as Wisdom Partners coaches, and we hear all kinds of things, all kinds of issues, and sometimes we just want founders to talk to each other because they all have similar problems and everybody would feel better if they could hear each other's problems. So this podcast is one way to move in that direction. And today we have as our guest Dan Koukol. He is the founder and CEO of Digit, which is a unified operating system for manufacturers. And so as I was looking at Dan's story on LinkedIn, I was like, I'm guessing Digit had to emerge from his struggles with Prodigy Discs, not computer discs, but disc golf or frisbee golf for the uninitiated. So Dan, tell us how you transitioned from disc golf to software.
Yeah, great question. And Josh, thank you so much for having me on. So the transition was really a long time in the making and stems from my love primarily of optimizing how organizations operate. And so the story predates Prodigy a little bit and then kind of goes through and kind of manifests itself while at Prodigy, where I was a consultant for almost a decade, worked with 83 companies across the US, so small mid-market enterprise companies. Brands that you may know like Icy Hot, Gold Bond, Gorilla Glue, Volkswagen, all the way down to mom and pop food and beverage shops, textile mills, things like that. And during that time, I had done a number of different initiatives, created software for these companies, big data things, and that really exposed me to legacy ERPs or software that these companies were using to try to run their supply chains from. And people hated these things. They complained about them constantly. And so I always kind of made a note of that. And I always kind of worked alongside them and also realized how difficult they were. And so long story short, my consulting career was going really well, but my wife and I were expecting our first child. And so wanted to tone down the travel and the late nights and things like that. And so kind of wanted to also jump across the table, if you will, to be a CEO or an operator versus a trusted advisor or consultant to just see how far I could take a company. And that opportunity opened up at Prodigy Disc. And so that was kind of my intro into Prodigy. And what was cool about that is I had played disc golf for a number of years leading up to that. And Prodigy moved from Woodstock, Georgia to Dalton, Georgia. And I was like, what are the odds that this company I love just moved to where I live? Like, that's crazy. And so I emailed and said, hey, I'd love a tour. I'd love to see how the discs are made. And they said, we don't do tours. And I said, well, hey, I was a consultant. I'd love to consult for free. And so long story short, you fast forward 6 months and I'm the CEO. And so
if I work for free, can I get a
That's
tour?
right. That's right. And so, I'll say this at a high level, and then I'm sure we could go a little bit deeper here. But, the Prodigy was always a great company, great people, great product, but really had a lot of the same struggles that like 82 of the 83 essentially companies I consulted with have, where there was just a lot of value leaking out of the business into, things that weren't, getting done or data that was missing, things like that. And so that's what initially led to turning that business around. So we grew it from 2 to 10 million in 18 months, brought it back to profitability, and then I started Digit from there.
Nice. 2 to 18 million or 2 to 10
2 to
million?
10 million. 2 to 10 million in 18 months.
18 months.
Yep.
That's impressive. I'm sure people probably ask you to tell this story often, but can you give us 2 or 3 quick hits on like what enabled you to do that?
Yeah, I think really the process was understand what the current state of the business is. What are you doing? What are you not doing? Empower the people already there who knew the industry, who knew the jobs, who knew the day-to-day. Drive alignment into what does an ideal future state look like? How do we launch new products? How do we optimize pricing? How do we run the production floor efficiently? and then let those people be in charge, and then take a supportive role. How can I support you? How can we drive these initiatives through? So at a very, very high level, that was sort of the secret sauce, really just kind of unlocking the value that was already there and just coordinating that and aligning that throughout the organization.
I want to double click on one thing because I think it's really interesting. Part of what you said, part of how you described your role is fairly directive, driving vision, driving alignment, but then another part is much more in the space of servant leadership that's a popular leadership theory. And so I on one hand, you're being a traditional boss CEO. On the other hand, you're like, how can I serve and support you to help you succeed in what you're doing? Tell me about that. I don't want to call it a polarity or a tension, but it's almost like two different hats.
Yeah, and it does feel like that at times, and there's a lot of nuance that comes with it that I kind of fell into or learned during that process. On one side, you can be, a boss, but by being a boss, you can be everybody's friend kind of boss, or you can be the boss that's like, do what I say. I don't like excuses, just get it done. Or you can be kind of somewhere in the middle. And then on the like, are you going to be kind of hands off? Are you going to be in the weeds as an individual contributor with your team? So there's all of these kind of factors that play into it. And what I found is the best servant leadership is start with casting a clear and compelling vision, and understand what those values are, and educate the entire team, because we had 14 employees and we grew to 54. Educate the entire team, like, why do we exist? Why is it important to come and make really good disc golf discs? Why does that matter to the customer? And how does business actually work, and how do you do things at a high level? What is a high level? Why should we ship orders within an hour or less of them being placed versus 2 weeks? Why should we care about if the discs have flashing on them or not? And then it's a matter of executing on that. And so when you do that, you take a lot of that tension and that polarity out of it, because the leadership piece is the one saying, here's the vision, here's where we want to go. And if you involve the people in the right way, and you're not directing them like you're going to like, but you're involving them in the process. What KPIs do you want to measure? And of course, like you know what the KPIs are, but you kind of build it together. You get that ownership. We did have to let some people go early that were toxic for the culture, and then rebuild the culture. And it was a very small percent of the team. But those kind of things, when you make those decisions, you immediately feel the organization, the culture move forward. And then when that happens, you're able to kind of take that servant leadership role, and you're able to do a lot of things leading by example. And there's a lot of offshoots to that. Good leaders are able to let go and fire themselves and bring in people much more talented to do different things. Good leaders are able to understand where the company maybe is drifting and how to get it back on track, and to then be a resource saying, hey, what do you need here? What are you missing? And that in turn allows people to approach you. You're more approachable, so they can ask. They know that asking for help is okay. So there's a lot in that, but it really starts with, from a leadership standpoint, if you can cast that clear and compelling vision and people are bought in, then you can just let them do their best work and then be that support role underneath.
I want to share with you a framework that we use, and because I'm hearing echoes of it in what you're describing, and I would love it if you just reflect back how it makes sense of what you did, because it sounds like a lot of this was intuitive for you. So, all right, so we call it what you're describing as ownership culture. So the long form definition there is every individual is empowered to take decisive action within their area of responsibility in alignment with the mission. So the three core pillars, which really have to kind of be built in order, are alignment, accountability, which is where you described it, where you help them set their KPIs so they own them,
Yep.
and then autonomy.
Yep.
So,
And I've got a perfect example of that too. So, when we're looking at fulfillment, for example, so I mentioned, it was, 1 or 2 weeks on average to fulfill a customer order when I started. And I'm like, that's crazy. I actually went and picked and packed and shipped orders for 2 days just to see, like, what does it feel like? And is this real, or can we do better? And it was very clear, like, yes, we could do much better. And so, one of the warehouse managers, Dylan, I came over and said, "Hey, Dylan, like I really think all orders should be sent out, pick, pack, and ship within an hour or less. That's the KPI." And we co-developed that together. And then Dylan and I created a bunch of other things, and we put a sheet together. And every day at 4:45 p.m., we would do a gimbal walk. So we would walk. I'd get out of the office and I'd go to the floor, and Dylan and I would just do one loop around the entire perimeter. And the first day, I would go in and I'd see a piece of trash on the floor, so I'd just pick it up and not say anything, throw it in the trash, do that kind of thing. And then Dylan started picking up. And we did that for 2 weeks. And after that 2 week period, then Dylan was the one taking me on the gimbal walk. And then after that, he was the one just self reporting on those KPIs and on these KPIs. So it was very much a like usher in, educate, here's why this is important. You go in, Dylan is now picking up the trash. His employees are now picking up the trash unprompted. And so you can kind of see it seep down. But very, very similar to that framework that you share with the extreme ownership and very effective.
Do you think that was one of the keys for you guys to 5x in 18 months?
There's no question. Yeah, there's no question. It was the team. It had nothing to do with, master MBA level strategy. It was pure, what I tell, Prodigy was always that $10 million business. Like the people, the brand, all of that was already there. It's kind of, I heard a story where, with, you hear a lot of really successful coaches will come in with these amazing athletes, and the first thing they'll do will be like, we're going to learn how to tie our shoe, right? Like we're going to learn how to do these like really small things. You have I'm reading The Power of Habit, and they talk about how there is the accumulation of small gains that can then yield disproportionate results. And so I attribute it directly to that of, coming in, starting at the smallest atomic level detail, teaching people like all of this stuff matters, and then that kind of matriculated up into the results that we had throughout the company.
So tell us a little about Digit and some of the problems you're solving for your current customers.
Yeah, so it's really the problems that I experienced firsthand, both in consulting and at Prodigy, which is people, process, systems. Kind of that adage is very true when you're looking at business performance. People is tough. That really gets into that leadership we talked about, right? Like that is a skill that I think you just have to have. Software is not going to really solve that. Like people, emotional intelligence, like all of that kind of stuff is going to be really strong there. But processes and systems absolutely can be solved, in our opinion. And so a lot of what I did as a consultant with the legacy ERPs was also just take screenshots. Like I have a 600 slide deck where I just took screenshots of like, this screen is really ugly. This one was actually kind of cool. This experience was good. This was bad. And it was kind of a passion project of mine for a long time. I've always just had a mind for software and building software and all of that. And then Prodigy, I built an early version of this, like this early version of the scorecard, what eventually became Digit. And that mixed in with the success we had was just like, hey, so many of these companies I consulted for and Prodigy tell me that statistically most companies in the US are in this same position. So let me go and actually take what has been so successful here that I've built in the past, and let's formalize it and try to bring this to the masses. And I had seen some data like, US manufacturing is 16% of GDP. 1.1 million companies, 87% of which are kind of in the same kind of Prodigy state. And that was the genesis to start Digit.
Cool. And what do you guys do? Like,
Yeah.
what problem are you
And
solving? Give us a
yeah.
specific.
And so what we're solving, so what we're solving is really the ability to manage the operations full supply chain for these companies. So coming in and saying, hey, because you're in spreadsheets, you're in these legacy systems, and there are a lot of problems with them. So one, you need a centralized platform to manage your whole company. That's thesis number one. Thesis number two is that platform should be intelligent and it should be proactive. So in the age of AI, that's now unlocked where that wasn't true 10 years ago. You couldn't make these systems proactive and log in and teach you how to run your business. And we believe that these systems need to be configurable by non-technical users, meaning you should be able to have anybody who doesn't need to know how to code to be able to actually just speak into existence the processes and systems that they need to help them achieve those Prodigy-like results. So that's what we do. And then we have a focus on the manufacturing and distribution sector.
Okay, great.
Yep.
What's a win for you guys on the Digit team just in the past 12 months that makes you really proud?
Yeah, we have a lot. Every month is better than the last. Like our last month was a record-setting month in terms of number of customers stood up, which we don't look at that as an internal digit metric, but as a number of new customers that have started their kind of prodigies who are now thinking about their business in a bit of a different way, understanding that there's a lot more opportunity than they realized. We are very proud of the fact that we're getting these customers out of legacy systems and out of legacy kind of software stacks and into a more modern future. So that's been kind of a nice thing from a timing standpoint with AI coming onto the scene is not only are we helping them think about their business differently, but we're also simultaneously that agent of change to get them into a more modern software stack, which is cool. So those are big wins, and it's really all about the customer. We have some internal wins as well. So with our company offsite that we just had, spending a week together, we've had a lot of big wins on the product side in terms of AI features that we've unlocked that are firsts in our space, which are pretty cool, and getting those to market and seeing initial customer reaction. So those would be the big ones, but I think ultimately, those customer wins are the ones that mean the most.
As you were talking, I was hearing echoes of the servant leadership philosophy you described in Prodigy.
Yeah.
And basically, the big win for you is you get to serve your customers and you're helping your customers. So this is a really, I heard a framework, one of my friends who's an emerging venture capitalist, he said he really wants to invest in missionary founders, not mercenary founders.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really cool too because you can like in a weird way you can kind of blend the two. Like mercenary is a very strong word and I certainly get the context there, but it's when you have a true North Star and you're really focused on the customer, like business success will follow. If you're obsessive over building an amazing product and you're obsessive over what is legitimately like forget the sales, forget the marketing, what's legitimately going to move the needle, and I was the customer where the needle was moved. And I saw like people were able to drive a car to work where they never had been able to do that before. I saw like life change and like community change when you had business success and business results. And that was such a life is so short. You can play the game and do all this kind of stuff, but when you can have that direct impact and be really good at what you do, that's really cool. So that the missionary founding mindset is very good because to me it means you have your priorities in the right order. It's not how do I get rich quick, what's in it for me. It's like what is it for others? How do I add value to others? And you still do have a little hint of that mercenary because like I still am fanatical. Like I'll stay up late. I'll outwork anybody. Like I'll go toe to toe with the best. And I've always been wired as kind of like the Energizer bunny where I just cannot turn it off. And I'm like crazy with that. But it's channeled in a way that's really focused and good and aligned with that, again, that true North Star for why we exist.
People listening to your story, I might assume it's been consistently up and to the right, but I'm pretty sure there were some dips and dives that were pretty painful in the process. Can you tell us about a failure or struggle experience and what you learned from it, how it changed you?
Yeah, we've almost died multiple times. You hear these startup stories and they say, every overnight success is 10 years in the making, that kind of thing. And we have elements of that. Like we're still on very early in our hopefully success story. But early on, we almost died. We almost ran out of money. So we had a very small team. We had secured an early investment and, we had, I think, as founders, skipped multiple payrolls. And this is before we ever got our first term sheet. And so we ended up getting a term sheet from a firm and we did a lot of off book and on book diligence on this firm. And then through that diligence, we uncovered some things that we just weren't super comfortable with. And so we ultimately declined the term sheet with no other options, no other term sheet, already with no cash in the bank. And then you fast forward and we ended up raising from some of the best folks that ever could have backed us. And that's been transformative for close to 100 companies and counting since that date. So that's been big. And that was really difficult because we're kind of battling like with, we see such a massive opportunity here and we have no other options, but we're going to stick to our values no matter what. And we're just going to honor that and it worked out. We have a ton of other stories as well where we get customers the product super early. We're selling modern ERP and we only have like one module. And so we get a great customer, they churn, then and so that was probably 3 or 4 years ago now. But those early days, especially when you're building a product this big, are really painful. They're really tough. A churned customer will ruin your whole day or weekend. And then that Monday you come back online and you have one customer say, "Hey, I used this feature and it was amazing," and then it just swings you right back to the top. So a lot of that early on in our history, for sure.
What do you think it is the biggest challenge you're trying to solve now?
I think it's really product and how do we continue to develop product at industry leading speed in a way that gets us closer, closer, closer to non-technical users being able to do whatever they want with the product. That's the biggest challenge. Go to market's always tricky for any startup company, but we've got significant momentum there. But that's really what we're, day in and day out making that progress towards is that product piece.
So, how have you evolved since starting Digit? Let's narrow it to Digit.
Yeah, trusting my gut more is the clear kind of evolution arc that I've seen. So early on, I placed a lot of trust in others in terms of my gut would be feeling something about, sales or marketing or product or customer or strategy or this, that, and the other. And because I'd never been a software CEO or founder or really in the space, I didn't trust my gut or my instincts really that much. And I kind of leaned towards the advice of others. And it's been cool since starting. I've gotten a lot more confident in my gut and understanding like what's what and being able to drive more forcefully decisions through, the business or being able to lead us in new areas because, launching and kind of building the product and what we're doing is very akin to that, what you hear of jumping off the cliff and building a plane before you hit the ground. And so not being shy, being very bold, charging into the unknown is definitely something that I've grown into. That's been the biggest evolution for me from a management style standpoint. And I think too, also, I mentioned earlier, I love staying up late and working hard, but getting more of that work-life balance in, closing the computer, spending time with the family. And then, my family does fall asleep pretty early and I'm just wired. So I'll stay up and work until I get tired. But being able to step back, enjoy the weekend, spend time with family has also been a welcome addition here over the last couple of years.
Yeah, work-life balance is super hard for founders,
Yeah,
especially missionary founders, because you feel so deeply passionate about it. It's hard. It's really hard to turn it off.
it is. It is. Yep,
What
I agree.
What have you found that helps you, quote, turn it off or step away?
I think two things. One is a realization that there's always more work to do tomorrow. So my dad told that to me and I never stopped. That this was last year sometime and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, you're right." Because I'd always try to get that one more thing done, one more thing done, one more thing done. I'll get 4 hours of sleep in exchange for getting, three more things done off the list. And over time you obviously start to feel that wear on you, but then you're like, you're right, like let's start prioritizing this. Let's actually go and work out or eat healthy or sleep. So that's big. And then the second piece is really just the support network that we surround ourselves with. So me personally, our lead investors I meet with weekly and biweekly, and the first questions that we talk about are like, how are you doing? How's the family? Did you get that workout in? Like I'll have investors, did you go work out? And then we'll get into, how's ACV growth and how's all the technical things. So those two pieces for me have been big because they keep me centered because I think, A, I have natural proclivities to not do that and to just run without stopping. And B, just kind of say, hey, you're so in the weeds. Let's zoom out a little bit and let's start with, if we've got a good foundation outside of Digit and outside of work, then that's going to make us more effective in the role that we're going to play inside the business.
Great, thank you. So that's kind of how you've been evolving. What do you think is the growing edge for you? How do you still need to evolve as a leader?
I think the big thing is going to come into play with evolving company processes in the org chart as we grow. And so understand and doing that because we're a remote first culture now, and whether we'll be remote first or we'll have some offices or we're a hybrid is kind of in we're determining that now. But understanding how do we scale systems? How do I remove myself from being blockers in different roles? How do we hire well? How do we build out that organization? How do we equip the team? So I think I'm moving very much into that phase of, we're through customer discovery and kind of early development. We've got a great core list of users. And I think it's really going towards that business building side of the tech CEO piece that is up next.
Yeah, we were talking about that, I think, a little before the call, and that's one of the hard shifts for founders. It is moving from being a technical expert to being a people and systems leader.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
it sounds like that's the transition you're in now.
Correct. Yep.
One framework that we use sometimes is the first transition, which you may have already made. How many people are on your team?
17.
Okay, so you've probably already made the first transition. It's from being the team captain quarterback to the
Yep.
team coach.
Yep. Yep.
That probably came fairly natural for you because of your prior experience. But then the one you're coming up on is around 20, 25 people, and that's becoming the general manager, where you're a couple of steps removed from the action. You hire the people who hire the people.
Yep. Yep.
You coach the people who coach the people. It's like a whole different set of skills, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's something I'm really looking forward to as well. And I think and that's where I think conversations like this are so important as well. And founders talking to founders is so important because it does sneak up on you a little bit. And you kind of whether you're just so busy in the day to day or you kind of assume it's not going to be that different or I got it handled, understanding that that can come quick and that can be very humbling in a lot of ways. And if you really want to be the best founder, I think just being very open and honest and candid of like where are the gaps, what do I know, what do I don't know, and then inviting conversations in like this because already like that analogy of going into being the coach and moving to GM just resonate. I'm already like dipping my toe into that GM. I feel it. Like we have specific initiatives right now. I think it's great. And so then, you can kind of lean in and say the amount of growing pains I think you can avoid ahead of time makes all the difference. And again, it cycles into like better work-life balance. All of these things we've talked about, I think is really important.
Awesome. So you hinted at this already, but how do you invest in yourself and your own leadership, your own growth as a leader?
Yeah, three things outside of time with family for me. So number one is just health and wellness. So sleep. So for me, that's sleep. That's trying to get 180 grams to 200 grams of protein per day. So the 1.8 per pound of body weight. And it is working out or exercising. And so that can be lifting weights is number one, but walking or just being active is a big part. The second part is just really daily habits. So I built a kind of little side project with Replit that is a daily habit tracker that has all of these things. And so I have a really good morning routine where I check in on different things in life, different things in business. I kind of get centered. And then I just make sure that I'm reading a chapter every day. So I'm reading The Power of Habit, like I mentioned. And so I'm investing in not only just continue to read and consume and kind of stay up to speed with what's coming up, but just also giving my mind that kind of reset, that refresh. And then the third thing is I do weekly sessions with Claude, and so I basically just say like, here's what I've seen in the business this week, here's what's going well, here's what's not going well, what are my gaps, and I have it actually rate me as a CEO on a scale of 0 to 100 on a radar diagram, and kind of work through a process of strategically, what do we need to do to serve our customers better? How does that go into product roadmap prioritization? And then, how can I be a better leader to my team? What is it that I'm missing? What am I doing well and I can continue doing? So those three things in balance, I think, would be the things that are the most influential.
Do you schedule your time with Claude? Like, is it on your calendar?
It is. It's not on my calendar, but it's on my alarm on my phone. So I have a pretty consistent time. I have started blocking out every Tuesday of like no meetings. Like don't nobody can reach me on Tuesday unless it's an emergency, and that's been really good too. That's because my calendar is very very full. But yeah, it's definitely a stalwart in my schedule.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for taking time for this. I think your story will be encouraging to a lot of other founders because lots of us lead companies that almost died.
Yes. Yes, I know many folks in my network. Yes.
Yeah. So,
So,
and it's great to hear people who tightened the belt and made it through, and or some people didn't, and but the fact that other people almost died is sort of like, okay, this is
yep.
this is
It's not
this
just
all.
me. Yep.
Yeah. Right. Cool. Well,
Awesome.
thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.